So now part 3 on issues to consider when you're selling your house. We left off in the last video and I had mentioned that after the offer is accepted, now you move on to purchase and sale, which is a separate contract in Massachusetts anyway. And that contract will incorporate all of the terms and conditions of the offer. Now at that point, you're going to actually contact your real estate attorney to prepare that second contract. And the second contract itself is going to be about 3 or 4 pages long. It has a lot of standard language in there. So a standard form purchase and sale agreement is what would be prepared. Next, what should happen is you and your attorney should review that purchase and sale agreement, just the initial terms anyway. And those would be things like the sale price, the deposits that are going to be tendered by the buyer, and there'll be contingencies most likely inside that purchase and sale agreement, which we'll talk about in a minute. There might be things that need to be repaired. There might be things that you're leaving behind or taking with you. All of those things will be included inside your purchase and sale agreement initially. Next, you and your attorney will review the actual dates inside the contract. And the way that you can think about the purchase and sale agreement at this point is like a timeline for you. There'll be some things that you need to do as time moves forward, as you move toward or push toward the closing of the house. Now, initially, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that if there are any repairs that you have to complete prior to closing, that you work on those. If there are any open permits that are out there or anything else that you have to adjust in the house, you make sure you take care of those items initially. And so in this timeline, what's going to happen is you'll sign your purchase and sale, and then the next stop will be a contingency for the buyer, which is the financing contingency. Now, in general, folks, a contingency is a condition that once it's met, the contract moves forward. And when it comes to the financing contingency for the buyer has to secure their financing contingency letter from their lender. Once that happens, then the buyer is in on the deal officially, and their deposit's locked into the deal. And if for any reason their financing falls through after that financing contingency date passes by, then you as a seller can make a claim for their deposit, usually. Sometimes sellers are left with damages as well, but we'll just keep it simple and say you can make a claim for the deposit. Now, the significance of the date of the financing contingency for the seller is that we at the office usually start to get the seller ready to close. And so what we'll do at that point is we'll collect information like the seller's present mortgage on the property. We'll obtain a payoff statement for that mortgage so that that mortgage will be paid at the time of closing. We'll also prepare a deed and most likely a limited power of attorney. That would be for the closing. The deed's going to be delivered at the time of the closing. Now, on the seller's side, what the seller's going to be doing, if they have a real estate agent, the real estate agent will most likely be handling a final water reading for the house, if it's a single family. The realtor or the seller at that point would make arrangements with the local fire marshal, and the fire marshal will come out to the house and inspect the house for smoke detectors. In Massachusetts, if there's fossil fuels, then there'll be a carbon monoxide detector certificate that's issued by the local fire department. That has to be obtained. And also, if it's a condo, if you're selling a condo, there may be a form that you have to obtain. In Massachusetts, for instance, it's called a 6D certificate, which certifies that all of the past condo fees have been paid. Next, what will happen is after the financing contingency date is met, then all the parties are going to move forward to the closing date. Now, once upon a time, what would happen is the parties would all meet up on a certain date at a certain time at one of the attorney's offices to complete the closing. And typically what happened in the past was the deed was delivered by the seller with all the other documents like the final water reading and the smoke detector certificate. And the buyer would finish their financing, sign their mortgage, a promissory note, and a check would be delivered to the seller. So the seller would be delivering the deed, the buyer would be delivering the check, and the closing would occur. Now, with the advances in technology and the pandemic, what we're doing is we're having our sellers sign limited powers of attorney, which is a great idea. And that basically would give me, as the closing or the seller's attorney, the ability to sign off for the seller on all the seller documents with the exception of the deed. And that package would be delivered to the closing attorney in advance, prior to the closing or on the day of the closing, so that the closing could be completed. And the seller never actually attends the closing anymore. And that works out to be a great convenience for sellers as well, especially if they're selling and they're buying. So in a nutshell, these are the things that a seller should consider if they're planning to put the house on the market for sale. So make sure you check out the links that are contained in the description of this video. On YouTube, they'd be below. On Facebook, most instances will be above. Make sure that you check out those links, and you'll also see the prior videos that I shot related to this one. If you're watching me on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe in the lower right-hand corner. If you're watching me on Facebook, make sure that you like the video. And some of my other prior videos will be appearing here. If you're watching YouTube, make sure that you check those out as well too. Dave Ceruolo, CeruoloLaw.com.